The billionaire took her virginity but cried when she whispered, "You were my only dream." Before we dive into this unforgettable story, tell us where you're watching from and if you believe love can survive power, wealth, and the weight of the world. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and let's begin this journey together. Some choices define us, even when the world doesn't understand them. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital hummed quietly overhead as Jessica Martin glanced at her phone for the fourth time in 15 minutes. 11:52 p.m. Her night shift had just started, but exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She'd been awake since 6 that morning, classes, study group, then straight to work without a break. She adjusted the thin cardigan over her scrubs and rolled her aching shoulders, trying to summon energy she didn't have. "Jessica, we need you in room 417, her supervisor called from the nurse's station, voice low and measured. "VIP patient. Confidential admission. You know the drill, discretion, professionalism, no unnecessary conversation." Jessica nodded, already moving down the corridor. She was used to this. The hospital treated powerful people regularly, politicians and executives who wanted privacy during vulnerable moments. She never asked questions. She just did her job and went home. But tonight would be different. Tonight everything would change. The corridor felt longer than usual as Jessica made her way toward room 417. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the polished linoleum, the sound echoing in the late-night quiet. Most of the hospital had settled into that peculiar stillness that came after visiting hours, when the machinery hummed louder than voices, when every footstep seemed amplified, when the world outside these walls ceased to exist. She paused at the door, clipboard in hand, and took a breath. VIP patients were always a gamble. Some were kind, grateful for discretion. Others treated nurses like furniture, invisible unless needed. She'd learned not to expect anything, not to hope for courtesy or connection. Just do the job, check vitals, document, move on. Jessica knocked twice, soft but firm, then pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, only the bedside lamp casting a warm glow across the space. A man sat in the chair by the window, his back to her, silhouetted against the city lights stretching out beyond the glass. He wasn't in the hospital bed. He wasn't wearing a gown. He just sat there, perfectly still, as if he'd been waiting for something he couldn't name. "Good evening," Jessica said, keeping her voice gentle. "I'm Jessica Martin. I'll be your nurse tonight." The man turned slowly, and for a fraction of a second her breath caught. He wasn't what she expected. No expensive suit, no flashy watch. Just a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and dark jeans that looked lived in. His face was striking, not in the polished way of magazine covers, but in the way of someone who'd weathered storms without breaking. Dark hair, slightly disheveled, eyes that looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. He was younger than she thought a VIP patient would be, maybe mid-30s. But he carried himself like someone much older, like someone who'd seen too much too soon. "Jessica," he repeated as if testing the name. His voice was quiet, measured. "Thank you for coming." She blinked, momentarily thrown off. Patients didn't usually thank her for showing up. It was literally her job. "Of course," she said, recovering quickly. "I need to check your vitals and make sure you're comfortable. Can I ask why you were admitted?" "Exhaustion," he said simply. "My doctor insisted I stay overnight for observation." Jessica moved closer, setting her clipboard on the bedside table. She pulled out the blood pressure cuff and thermometer, her movements practiced and efficient. He extended his arm without being asked, which she appreciated. Some patients made everything difficult. As she wrapped the cuff around his bicep, she noticed his hands, strong but not rough. The hands of someone who worked but not with labor. There were faint scars on his knuckles, old ones, like he'd once fought his way through something and won. "Your pressure's a bit elevated," she noted, reading the numbers. "Have you been under a lot of stress lately?" A slight smile tugged at his lips, humorless. "You could say that." She made a note on her chart, then checked his temperature. Normal, pulse slightly elevated but nothing alarming. "When's the last time you slept? Really slept?" she asked, more out of genuine concern than protocol. He considered the question longer than most people would. "I'm not sure I remember." Jessica looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw something she recognized. The kind of bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much for too long. She saw it in her own mirror some mornings. "I understand," she said softly. "Sleep's a luxury when your mind won't stop running." His eyes met hers and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "You get it," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I do." Jessica finished documenting his vitals and tucked her pen into her pocket. "I'm a nursing student. Between classes, clinicals, and shifts like this, I think I've forgotten what 8 hours of sleep feels like." "Why do you do it?" he asked suddenly. "Push yourself that hard." Most people didn't ask her questions like that. Most people didn't ask her anything at all. "Because I want a life that means something," she answered honestly. "I want to help people, and I want to prove to myself that I can build something real even when it's hard." He nodded slowly, as if she'd said something profound instead of obvious. "That's rare," he murmured. "What is?" "Knowing what you want, and being willing to suffer for it." Jessica tilted her head, studying him. "What about you? What do you want?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked away, back toward the window, toward the glittering skyline beyond. "I used to think I knew," he said quietly, "but lately I'm not sure anymore." There was a vulnerability in his voice that made her chest tighten. She didn't know this man, didn't know his name, his story, his life. But in that moment, sitting in the dim light of room 417, she felt like she understood him better than people she'd known for years. "Can I ask you something?" he said, turning back to her. "Of course." "Do you ever feel invisible? Like you're doing everything right, working as hard as you can, but the world just doesn't see you?" Jessica's throat tightened. That was exactly how she felt, every single day. "Yes," she whispered, "all the time." "Me too," he said, and the way he said it so plainly, so honestly, made her believe him. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed in the distance. A monitor beeped softly down the hall, but in this room, time seemed to slow. "I should let you rest," Jessica finally said, though part of her didn't want to leave. "Will you be back?" he asked, and there was something almost hopeful in his tone. "I'm on shift until 7 a.m., she said. "I'll check on you in a few hours." "Good," he paused, then added, "Thank you, Jessica, for listening." "Any time," she said and meant it. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her at the door. "Jessica." She looked back. "What do you dream about?" he asked. "When you let yourself dream?" No one had ever asked her that. Not her friends, not her professors, not anyone. She thought about lying, about giving some safe, shallow answer. But something about this man made her want to tell the truth. "I dream about a life that feels real," she said slowly. "And maybe someone who sees me before the rest of the world does." His expression softened, and for just a second she saw something flicker in his eyes. Understanding, longing, or maybe just recognition of a truth he'd been carrying alone. "That's a good dream," he said quietly. Jessica left the room with her heart beating faster than it should, unsure why a simple conversation with a stranger felt like it had shifted something fundamental inside her. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know that he was one of the most powerful men in the country. She didn't know that this night would change everything. But as she walked back down that fluorescent-lit corridor, she couldn't shake the feeling that she just met someone who would matter more than she could possibly understand. Jessica didn't expect to see him again so soon. When she arrived for her next shift 2 nights later, her supervisor pulled her aside before she'd even clocked in. Room 417 requested you specifically, Janet said, eyebrows raised. Same patient from Thursday. He's staying another few days for observation, and apparently he only wants you handling his care. Jessica's stomach did a strange flip. He asked for me by name. By name? Janet's expression was unreadable. Must have made quite an impression. Just remember professional boundaries, Jessica. VIP patients can be complicated. Of course, Jessica said quickly, though her pulse had already quickened. She found herself walking faster than usual toward his room, then forced herself to slow down. This was just a patient, just another assignment. The conversation they'd had was nothing special. People talked to nurses all the time. But when she knocked and entered room 417, and he looked up from the book he was reading with something that looked almost like relief, she knew she'd been lying to herself. "You came back," he said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "You requested me," Jessica replied, setting down her medical kit. "I'm flattered, though I have to warn you, my shift tonight is even longer than last time. You might get sick of seeing me." "I doubt that very much." She felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away quickly, busying herself with preparing the blood pressure monitor. Professional. Boundaries. Janet's words echoed in her head. "How have you been feeling?" she asked, slipping into nurse mode. "Honestly, better than I have in months." He extended his arm for the cuff without being prompted. Turns out being forced to rest actually works. "Imagine that," Jessica said with a small smile. "Doctors knowing what they're talking about. Revolutionary concept." There was a playful edge to his tone that hadn't been there before. He seemed lighter somehow, less weighted down. As she recorded his vitals, blood pressure improved, pulse steady, she noticed other small changes. His hair was still damp from a shower. He'd shaved. The exhaustion in his eyes had softened, though it hadn't disappeared entirely. "Your numbers look much better," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "I've been sleeping, reading, thinking." He paused, "and looking forward to these check-ins more than I probably should." Jessica's hand stilled on her clipboard. She looked at him, searching for hidden meaning, for some angle she was missing. But his expression was open, honest, vulnerable in a way that made her chest tighten. "I've been thinking about our conversation too," she admitted quietly. "About what you asked me, what I dream about. And I realized no one's ever asked me that before. Not like you did. Not like they actually wanted to know the answer." He set his book aside. She caught a glimpse of the title, something about philosophy and meaning, and gave her his full attention. "I did want to know. I still do." Jessica pulled up the visitor's chair and sat down, even though she had 6 other patients to check on. Even though Janet would probably raise her eyebrows again if she stayed too long. Something about this man made her want to forget about protocol and just talk. "Tell me about your mother," he said suddenly. "You mentioned her the other night. The way you said it, I could tell she mattered." The observation caught her off guard. She'd barely mentioned her mother, just a passing reference when explaining why she worked so hard. But he'd caught it, remembered it. "She died 3 years ago," Jessica said, the words still difficult even now. "Cancer, stage 4, diagnosed too late." She took a breath. "She was a nurse too, that's why I'm doing this. She used to say that holding someone's hand in their darkest moment was a sacred thing. I wanted to honor that." "I'm sorry," he said, and the way he said it, simple, sincere, without the awkward platitudes most people offered, made her believe he meant it. "What about your family?" Jessica asked. "Are they worried about you being in here?" Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or loneliness. "My parents died when I was young," he said. "Car accident. After that, it was just boarding schools and distant relatives who saw me as an obligation. I learned early that the only person you can really count on is yourself." Jessica's heart clenched. That's a hard lesson for a child. "It was necessary." He looked down at his hands. But it also meant I never learned how to let people in, how to trust that someone might want to know me for reasons that aren't transactional. Is that what you think? Jessica asked softly. That all relationships are transactions? In my experience, yes, people want something, always. Money, access, favors, connections. He met her eyes. Until I met you, I'd forgotten what it felt like to talk to someone who just listened, without an agenda. The intensity of his gaze made her look away. She shouldn't be having this conversation. This wasn't professional. This wasn't safe. But it felt real in a way nothing else in her life did. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "You just told me about your parents dying. I think we're past the small talk phase." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Fair point." He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "What scares you most? Not superficial fears, the deep ones, the ones that wake you up at night." Jessica didn't answer right away. She thought about deflecting, about keeping her walls up. But something about the way he'd shared his own pain made her want to match his honesty. "I'm terrified of becoming invisible," she finally said. "Of working myself to exhaustion, doing everything right and still ending up no one. Just another person the world forgot to notice." She swallowed hard. "My mom used to tell me I was special, that I had a light in me. But since she died, I feel like that light's been dimming. Like I'm fading into the background of my own life." "You're not invisible, Jessica." "How do you know?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're the only person in months who's looked at me like I'm human instead of a means to an end. I know you work 2 jobs and go to school full-time because you're chasing something meaningful. I know you remember what your mother taught you about holding people's hands in dark moments." He leaned forward slightly. "And I know that in the 2 conversations we've had, you've made me feel less alone than I have in years. That's not invisible, Jessica. That's extraordinary." Her throat tightened. She blinked rapidly, fighting back the sudden sting of tears. "What about you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "What scares you?" He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "I'm terrified that everyone who's ever claimed to care about me only wanted what I could give them. That if I lost everything tomorrow, all the success, all the resources, all the power, I'd be completely alone." He looked directly at her. "I'm scared that no one will ever want me for who I am beneath all the rest of it." "I don't even know what you do for a living," Jessica said, "and I still wanted to come back tonight." Something shifted in his expression, hope mixed with disbelief, like he wanted to trust her words but didn't know how. "Why?" he asked. "Why come back?" "Because talking to you feels like the most real thing that's happened to me in a long time," she admitted. "Because you see me too, and that's rare." The air between them felt charged, heavy with words they weren't saying. Jessica knew she should leave, should put distance between herself and whatever this was becoming, but her feet wouldn't move. "I don't want to just be your patient," he said quietly. "What do you want to be?" "I don't know yet, but I know I want to keep talking to you, keep learning about you, if you'll let me." Jessica's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. This was complicated. This could end badly. She didn't even know his full name. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw someone who understood loneliness the same way she did. Someone who'd been waiting for connection just as desperately. "Okay," she whispered, "let's keep talking." His smile was small but genuine, and it transformed his entire face. They talked for another hour, about childhood dreams and teenage rebellions, about favorite books and foods they missed, about the small moments that had shaped them into who they were. He told her about learning to swim in a lake at summer camp, the only place he'd felt free as a kid. She told him about her mother teaching her to bake, how she still couldn't make cookies without crying. It wasn't flirting, it wasn't romance. It was something deeper, something that felt like the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. When Jessica finally stood to leave, Nearly 2 hours passed when she should have moved on to other patients. He caught her hand gently. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me." "Thank you for the same," she replied. As she walked toward the door, his voice stopped her. "Jessica, tomorrow night, would you want to take your break in here? I could order food, nothing fancy, just company." She should say no. She absolutely should say no. "I'd like that," she said instead. His smile made her feel weightless. Jessica stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her, leaning against the wall to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking slightly. Her heart felt too big for her chest. That's when she heard it. A voice from inside room 417, sharp and commanding, completely different from the gentle tone he'd used with her. "I don't care what the board thinks. Tell them the acquisition moves forward whether they like it or not. And get Mitchell on the phone. I want those contracts revised by Monday." A pause. "No," I said, "Monday. Do I need to remind you what happens when people miss my deadlines?" Another pause, then a cold laugh. "Good, now handle it. I'm not paying you to make excuses." Jessica's blood went cold. The warmth, the vulnerability, the gentle man who'd shared his fears with her. And now this, voice dripping with authority and power, speaking to someone like they were disposable. Her mind raced, acquisition, board contracts, deadlines. Who was he? She stood frozen in the hallway, listening as his tone shifted back to something softer as the call ended, back to the version of him she thought she knew. But now she wondered, had she ever known him at all? Jessica couldn't sleep. She'd gotten home at 8 in the morning, exhausted from her shift, but the moment her head hit the pillow, her mind started racing. That phone call, that voice, the way he'd transformed from vulnerable to commanding in seconds. By noon, she gave up pretending to rest. She sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop, staring at the search bar. She didn't even know his last name, but she remembered fragments from the phone call, something about Mitchell, about contracts, about a board making decisions. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This felt like a violation. He'd shared pieces of himself with her, trusted her with his loneliness and fear. Going behind his back to investigate felt wrong. But so did being lied to. She typed, "VIP patient, St. Vincent Hospital tech executive." Nothing useful, too broad. She tried again, "David Tech Billionaire acquisition." The first result made her stomach drop. David Hill announces hostile takeover of Quantum Dynamics, tech mogul's biggest move yet. She clicked the link with trembling hands. The article was from 3 days ago. There was a photo, him standing in front of a wall of glass windows in an immaculate suit, expression unreadable, cold, powerful, nothing like the man in the hospital room. David Hill, founder and CEO of Hill Technologies, has initiated a $4.2 billion acquisition of competing firm Quantum Dynamics, sources confirm. Hill, 34, built his empire from nothing after aging out of foster care at 18, becoming one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. Known for his ruthless business tactics and obsessive privacy, Hill rarely grants interviews and has never been photographed with a romantic partner. Jessica read the words 3 times, but they wouldn't settle into reality. Billionaire, self-made, ruthless. She scrolled further, finding more articles. Profile pieces in Forbes and Bloomberg, analysis of his business strategies, aggressive, uncompromising, brilliant. Photos of him at charity galas, always alone, always maintaining careful distance from everyone around him. One headline caught her eye, "The man who trusts no one, inside David Hill's isolated empire." She clicked it, skimming through paragraphs about his childhood in the foster system, his meteoric rise through the tech industry, his reputation for cutting off anyone who betrayed him. "Hill operates on the assumption that everyone has an angle," said one former employee who requested anonymity. He's been burned too many times to believe in genuine connection. Everything is a transaction to him. Jessica's chest constricted. He'd said almost those exact words to her, about relationships being transactional, about people always wanting something. She'd thought he was being vulnerable. Now she wondered if he'd been warning her. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "It's David. The nurse supervisor gave me your contact. I hope that's okay. I'm looking forward to tonight." Tonight, their dinner in his room, the plan they'd made. Jessica stared at the message, then back at the laptop screen showing his face in that expensive suit, surrounded by steel and glass and power. Who was she to him? A distraction, a game, some kind of experiment in slumming with ordinary people. Her hands shook as she typed a response. "We need to talk. I'll be there at 8. She didn't wait for his reply. Jessica arrived at the hospital 40 minutes before her shift started, still wearing jeans and a sweater instead of scrubs. Her supervisor shot her a curious look but didn't comment. She walked to room 417, with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. When she knocked, his voice came immediately, "Come in." He was standing by the window, dressed casually again, Henley shirt, dark pants. He turned with a smile that faltered the instant he saw her expression. "Jessica, what's wrong?" "David Hill." She said the name like an accusation. "That's your full name, isn't it?" The color drained from his face. "You looked me up. I overheard your phone call last night, the one where you sounded nothing like the person I've been talking to." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts to stay calm. "So yes, I looked you up, and imagine my surprise to discover I've been pouring my heart out to one of the richest men in the country." He moved toward her, hands raised slightly as if approaching something fragile. "Jessica, please let me explain." "Explain what?" She laughed, sharp and brittle. "That you've been playing some kind of game, testing to see if the poor nursing student would treat you differently if she knew you were a billionaire." "No," his voice was firm. "That's not what this was." "Then what was it, David?" She emphasized his name bitterly. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you lied to me from the beginning. You let me think you were just someone normal, someone like me." "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." Her voice rose, months of exhaustion and vulnerability suddenly transforming into anger. "I told you about my mother, about my fears, about feeling invisible, and the whole time you were sitting there with enough money to buy this entire hospital, pretending to understand what it's like to struggle." "I do understand." He took another step closer. "Money doesn't erase loneliness, Jessica. It doesn't fix the feeling that everyone around you wants something. If anything, it makes it worse." "Oh, poor billionaire," she shot back. "Must be so hard having unlimited resources and power." He flinched like she'd slapped him, and for a second she regretted the words. But only for a second. "You want to know why I didn't tell you?" His voice dropped, dangerous and raw. "Because of exactly this reaction. Because the moment people know who I am, I stop being a person. I become a bank account, an opportunity, a target." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding through his usual control. "For 2 nights you talked to me like I was human. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "So I was what? A social experiment, a vacation from your real life." "You were the first real thing I've experienced in years." The words burst out of him, loud enough that they both froze. Silence crashed between them. Jessica's anger wavered, confusion rushing in to fill the space. His chest was heaving, eyes intense with something that looked painfully like desperation. "I didn't come to this hospital to meet you," he said quietly. "I came because my doctor threatened to have me institutionalized if I didn't rest. I was working 20-hour days, surviving on caffeine and spite, because work was the only thing that made sense anymore. And then you walked in." He moved closer, stopping just out of reach. "You looked at me and saw someone tired, someone struggling, Someone worth asking questions to, not my portfolio or my company or my reputation, just me. His voice cracked. I should have told you sooner. You're right about that, but I was terrified that if you knew, you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm not the person you thought I was. Jessica's throat tightened. Aren't you? I don't know, he admitted. I've been playing roles for so long, I'm not sure I remember who I am underneath it all. But when I'm with you, I feel like I'm starting to find out. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to protect herself from whatever this was becoming. But the vulnerability in his voice, the fear in his eyes, it was the same person she'd connected with. The same loneliness she'd recognized. Why me? She whispered. You could have anyone. Why risk this with someone you barely know? Because you're the only person who wanted to know me before finding out what I'm worth. He took a shaky breath. And because when you talked about your dreams, about wanting to be seen, I realized I've been dreaming the same thing. I just stopped believing it was possible. Jessica closed her eyes, fighting the war raging inside her. Logic screamed to walk away. Self-preservation demanded distance. But her heart, traitorous, foolish thing, remembered how it felt to sit in that chair and talk to someone who actually listened. I feel like an idiot, she said finally. Sitting there, telling you about my student loans and my double shifts, while you probably spend more on lunch than I make in a month. I grew up in foster care with nothing, David said softly. I aged out of the system at 18 with $200 and a duffel bag. Everything I have now, I built because I refused to stay invisible. So when you talked about fighting to matter, about creating something real, I understood that more than you know. She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. I know, and I don't blame you, he swallowed hard. But I'm asking you to try, not because of who I am out there. He gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the city and empire beyond. But because of who I want to be when I'm with you. And who's that? Honest, present, someone worthy of the trust you gave me before you knew my name. Jessica stared at him, searching for lies, for manipulation, for any sign this was another game. But all she saw was the same man who'd asked about her dreams, the same loneliness she carried. If we do this, if I give you another chance, no more secrets, she said firmly. No more hiding behind half-truths. Deal. And I need time, space to process this without you watching me with those eyes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. These eyes. You know exactly what I mean. He raised his hands in surrender. Time and space, whatever you need. Jessica moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. The phone call I overheard, that version of you cold, commanding, is that who you really are? David considered the question seriously. It's who I have to be to survive in my world, but it's not who I want to be in yours. She nodded slowly, then turned back to face him fully. One chance, David, outside these hospital walls, somewhere neutral, somewhere real. Her voice steadied with each word. We start over. No VIP rooms, no nurses and patients. Just two people trying to figure out if this thing between us is real or if we're both just desperate enough to believe it is. Hope flickered across his face, fragile and bright. When? I'm off this weekend, Saturday, 2 o'clock. She met his eyes. And David, don't send a car, don't choose somewhere expensive. Just show up like a normal person meeting someone they care about. I can do that. We'll see, Jessica said, and walked out before her resolve could crumble. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. She just agreed to date a billionaire. This was either the bravest or stupidest decision she'd ever made. Possibly both. Saturday afternoon arrived wrapped in October sunlight and cool air that smelled like falling leaves. Jessica changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans, ankle boots, and a cream sweater. Nothing fancy, nothing trying too hard. She pulled her hair into a loose ponytail, applied minimal makeup, and stared at herself in the mirror. "This is insane," she told her reflection. "Completely insane." Her phone buzzed. "I'm outside. No car, no driver, just me." She grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs from her tiny studio apartment, heart hammering with each step. David stood on the sidewalk wearing dark jeans, a navy jacket, and an expression that looked almost nervous. No designer labels visible, no security detail lurking nearby. Just him, hands in his pockets, looking up at her building like he wasn't sure he had the right address. When he saw her, relief flooded his features. "Hi," he said, and the simplicity of it made her smile despite herself. "Hi." She stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure of the rules. Did they hug, shake hands, stand awkwardly until the tension passed? David solved the problem by extending his hand, formal and slightly ridiculous. "David Hill, nice to meet you." Jessica actually laughed and shook his hand. "Jessica Martin, pleasure." "Should we start over completely? I could pretend I don't know you're afraid of thunderstorms or that you can't make cookies without crying." "Only if you pretend you didn't tell me about that time you got lost at summer camp and lived on vending machine snacks for 2 days." "Deal." His smile was genuine, warm. "So, Jessica Martin, would you like to take a walk with a complete stranger who definitely isn't a tech billionaire in disguise?" "That depends. Does this stranger have a plan or are we winging it?" "Winging it? I figured you could show me your world for a change." Something about that offer, the willingness to follow instead of lead, loosened the remaining tension in her shoulders. "Okay then, follow me." They walked through her neighborhood, past bodegas and laundromats, corner stores with fruit stands spilling onto the sidewalk. David looked around like he was seeing the city for the first time, taking in details she'd stopped noticing years ago. "There's a coffee shop around the corner," Jessica said. "Nothing special, but they make a decent latte and the owner doesn't mind if you sit for hours." "Sounds perfect." The cafe was exactly as she described, small, slightly worn, filled with mismatched furniture and the smell of espresso. Mrs. Chen waved from behind the counter when they entered. "Jessica, your usual." "Please, and whatever he wants." David studied the handwritten menu board like it contained secrets of the universe. "I'll have the same." They settled into a corner booth with chipped laminate and wobbly table legs. Jessica wrapped her hands around her cup, letting the warmth seep into her palms. "Be honest," she said. "When's the last time you were in a place like this?" David considered the question seriously. "College, maybe, before everything took off. I used to study in cafes because my apartment was too depressing." He looked around, something wistful crossing his face. "I'd forgotten what this felt like. Anonymous. Normal." "Is that what you want, to be normal?" "I want to be seen as something other than a net worth and a reputation." He met her eyes. "With you, I am. That's rare doesn't even begin to cover it." Jessica took a sip of her latte to hide the flush creeping up her neck. "You're not what I expected a billionaire to be like." Disappointed. Confused mostly. She set down her cup. "You could be anywhere right now. 5-star restaurants, exclusive clubs, whatever wealthy people do on Saturdays. Why are you here with me, drinking mediocre coffee in a place with questionable Wi-Fi?" "Because this is the first time in months I've felt like myself instead of playing a role." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "And because I meant what I said at the hospital. You're real, Jessica. Everything in my world is calculated, strategic, transactional. But this," he gestured between them, "feels like the opposite of all that." "It scares me," she admitted quietly. "Me too." They sat with that honesty for a moment, two people acknowledging the precipice they were approaching. "Tell me something true," David said, "something you don't usually share." Jessica traced the rim of her cup, considering. "I'm 24 and I've never been in a serious relationship. never even been close. His expression didn't change, didn't judge. Why not? Because everyone I've dated wanted something easy, something casual, and I've always wanted, she searched for the right words, something that matters, something worth waiting for. She looked up at him. Does that sound naive? It sounds brave, he said softly. Knowing what you want and refusing to settle, that takes courage most people don't have. Or maybe I'm just too picky, and I'll end up alone with 17 cats. You don't strike me as a cat person. Dogs then, 17 dogs. He smiled, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Favorite movies, worst dates, childhood embarrassments. They talked until their coffee went cold, until Mrs. Chen started giving them pointed looks about the line forming at the door. Outside, the sun had shifted lower, painting everything golden. "Walk more?" David asked. "Sure." They wandered through a nearby park, leaves crunching under their feet. Children played on swing sets while elderly couples fed pigeons. It was achingly ordinary and somehow perfect because of it. "Can I ask you something?" Jessica said as they found a bench overlooking a small pond. "Anything." "That night at the hospital, when you talked about being wanted only for what you provide, has anyone ever wanted you for who you are? Really?" David was quiet for a long time, watching ducks glide across the water. "I thought so once, when I was 26. His voice carried old pain. "Her name was Rebecca. We met at a conference. She said she didn't care about the money, that she loved me for my mind, my ambition. We dated for a year." Jessica waited, sensing there was more. "I proposed, she said yes. 2 weeks later I found out she'd been feeding information about my company to a competitor. Everything, our conversations, my strategies, confidential plans. She'd been recording me." He exhaled slowly. "Turned out her boyfriend worked for my biggest rival. I was the job, not the relationship." "David, that's why I don't trust easily." "Yeah." He turned to look at her. "That's also why what you said about never being in a serious relationship because you're waiting for something real resonated so deeply. At least you've been protecting yourself honestly. I just built higher walls." Jessica reached over and took his hand without thinking. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "I'm not her," Jessica said firmly. "I don't want your money or your connections. I barely understand what your company does. Tech infrastructure and cloud computing solutions." "See, no idea what that means." He laughed, genuine and surprised. "Most people pretend to understand." "I'm not most people." "No," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "You're definitely not." They sat like that as the sun continued its descent, hands intertwined, watching the world move around them. "I should tell you something," Jessica said eventually, "before this goes any further." David turned to face her fully, attentive and patient. "I've never," she paused, gathering courage. "I'm still a virgin." She braced for shock, judgment, or worse, pity, but David's expression remained steady, serious. "Okay," he said simply. "That's it, just okay." "What did you expect me to say?" "I don't know. Most guys react like it's either a challenge or a burden." "Then you've been talking to boys, not men." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Jessica, intimacy isn't a transaction or a milestone to rush through. If and when that happens between us, it'll be because we both choose it, because it means something, not because there's some timeline we're supposed to follow." Relief flooded through her, so powerful her eyes stung. "You mean that?" "I mean that. Your body, your choice, your timeline, always." He lifted her hand and pressed a brief kiss to her knuckles, tender, respectful. "I'm more interested in knowing your mind and heart than rushing toward anything physical. Even though you could probably," she gestured vaguely, "find someone who wouldn't make you wait." "I don't want someone, I want you, however long that takes." His eyes held hers. "Is that okay?" Jessica nodded, not trusting her voice. They stayed in the park until the temperature dropped and stars began piercing the darkening sky. They talked about books and music, argued playfully about whether breakfast food was superior to dinner food, shared stories that had nothing to do with money or status or the vast gap between their worlds. As David walked her back to her apartment, their hands still linked, Jessica felt something shifting inside her chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of trust. At her building entrance, they stopped and faced each other. "Thank you," Jessica said, "for today, for being this. Thank you for giving me another chance." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I see you again, tomorrow maybe?" "I work a double shift tomorrow." "Then Tuesday." She smiled. "Tuesday." David leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, chaste and sweet and somehow more intimate than anything else. "Good night, Jessica Martin." "Good night, David Hill." She watched him walk away, hands in his pockets, looking back once to wave before disappearing around the corner. Inside her apartment, Jessica leaned against the door and let herself smile like an idiot. Her phone buzzed, a text from her roommate Sarah, who was visiting family for the weekend. The message contained a single link to a gossip website. Jessica clicked it, still floating on the high of the perfect day. The headline shattered everything. Tech billionaire David Hill spotted with mystery woman. Who is Jessica Martin? Below it, a photo, her and David on that park bench, hands intertwined, her laughing at something he'd said. The angle was distant but clear enough, unmistakable. Her phone started buzzing with notifications. Instagram, Facebook, unknown numbers texting questions. Jessica's hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments, already multiplying under the article. Gold digger alert. How much is he paying her? She's not even that pretty, lol. Another nobody trying to trap a billionaire. Her perfect day crystallized into something sharp and cutting. The real world had found them. And it was nowhere near as kind as the bubble they'd built. Jessica didn't sleep that night. She sat on her bed with her laptop, watching her life become public entertainment in real time. The article had been shared thousands of times. Her full name, her age, her nursing program, all laid bare for strangers to dissect. Someone had found her Instagram, her Facebook. A photo from her high school yearbook appeared on Twitter with cruel captions. By sunrise, she had 47 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize and hundreds of social media notifications she was too afraid to open. At 6 a.m., her phone rang with a number she did recognize. The hospital. "Jessica, it's Janet. We need you to come in early. Administration wants to speak with you before your shift." Her stomach dropped. About what? A pause. You know about what? The administrative office felt like a courtroom. 3 people sat across the conference table. The hospital director, the head of nursing, and someone from legal whose presence made Jessica's palms sweat. "Miss Martin," the director began, tone neutral but eyes sharp, "I'm sure you're aware of the media attention surrounding your relationship with one of our recent patients." We're not," Jessica stopped, realizing she didn't even know what they were. "We went on one date." "A date that's now been viewed by 2 million people," the legal representative said, sliding a tablet across the table showing the article and dozens of spin-offs. "And that's raised questions about professional boundaries, patient privacy, and the hospital's reputation." Jessica's throat tightened. "I didn't violate any policies. We didn't start seeing each other until after he was discharged." "Technically true," the head of nursing acknowledged. "But the optics are problematic. We've already received calls from journalists asking about our protocols for VIP patients, about whether nurses are accessible to wealthy donors." The implication hit like a slap. "I didn't seek him out because of who he is," Jessica said, voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "I didn't even know until after we'd already connected, and I certainly didn't ask for my private life to become tabloid fodder. We understand this is difficult, the director said, though his expression suggested otherwise. But we need to consider the institution's integrity. We're placing you on administrative leave pending a full review. You're suspending me, Jessica stood abruptly, for going on a date on my day off. We're protecting you and the hospital, the legal rep corrected. The media attention could interfere with patient care. Other staff members are already being approached for comments. This is temporary until things calm down. And my tuition, my bills, I need this job. You'll be paid for the leave period. But Miss Martin, the director's voice softened slightly, you should consider whether this relationship is worth the scrutiny. Mr. Hill's world operates on a different level than ours. These situations rarely end well for the person with less insulation. Jessica grabbed her bag and walked out before they could see her cry. Her phone rang the moment she stepped outside. David. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept. Jessica, I just saw the news. I'm so sorry. I have lawyers working on. They suspended me. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. From the hospital because of you. Silence. I'll fix this, he said urgently. I'll call the hospital director, make a donation, whatever it takes. Don't, the word came out sharp. Don't throw money at this like it's another business problem to solve. Then tell me what to do, please. Jessica leaned against the hospital wall, watching people pass by, some glancing at her with recognition, others whispering. She was visible now, but not the way she dreamed about. I don't know if you can fix this, David. Your world and mine, they don't mix. We were foolish to think they could. Jessica. There are photographers outside my apartment building. My classmates are texting asking if I'm really dating you or if it's a publicity stunt. Someone posted my student loan information online. My student loan information, David. Do you understand how violated that feels? Come stay at my place. I have security, privacy. You'll be safe. Safe? She laughed bitterly. Your solution is to pull me deeper into your world, to hide behind your walls and your money. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need my life back. Her voice broke. I need to go to work and class without people whispering. I need to be Jessica Martin, nursing student, not David Hill's mystery girlfriend, or whatever headline they've invented today. She heard him breathing on the other end, struggling for words. What if I release a statement? He offered. Tell them to leave you alone, that you're off limits. That makes it worse. Then I'm definitely the girlfriend. Then I'm officially part of your narrative. Jessica closed her eyes. I'm disappearing, David. Just like I feared, except instead of fading into the background, I'm being swallowed by your spotlight. So what are you saying? The question hung between them, heavy with implications they both understood. I'm saying I need space, time to think without reporters tracking my every move. How much time? I don't know. Another silence, this one aching with things neither could say. I understand, David said quietly. But Jessica, I meant everything. This wasn't some game or experiment. What we have, it's real for me. I know, she whispered. That's what makes this so hard. The next 72 hours blurred together in a nightmare of constant surveillance. Jessica stopped going to her favorite coffee shop after a photographer followed her inside. She deleted all her social media accounts after the comments became too vicious to ignore. A gossip site published an investigation into her background, interviewing people she'd barely known in high school manufacturing drama where none existed. Her inbox filled with messages. From Sarah, are you okay? Want me to come home early? From classmates, is it true? Are you really dating him? From strangers, how much is he paying you? From David, every day, I'm here when you're ready, no pressure. On the fourth day, a sleek black car appeared outside her building. The driver handed her an envelope. Inside, a key card, an address, and a handwritten note. This is a private apartment. Secure building, no press access. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings, no expectations. Just somewhere safe to breathe. Whether you choose to see me again or not, you deserve peace. D. Jessica stared at the offering, emotions warring inside her. He was trying to help, she knew that. But accepting felt like stepping onto a path she couldn't control. A path where David solved her problems with resources she could never match, creating an imbalance that would define their entire dynamic. She texted him, "Can we talk, in person?" His response came within seconds, "Tell me where and when." They met at the same park bench where they'd sat just days ago, though it felt like a lifetime had passed. David arrived first, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, a disguise that would have been laughable if the situation weren't so dire. Jessica sat beside him but didn't take his hand. "Thank you for the apartment offer," she said, "but I can't accept it." "Jessica, let me finish." She turned to face him. "These past few days I've been thinking about what you said at the hospital, about people only wanting you for what you can provide, and I realized, if I let you fix this with money and resources, I become exactly that, someone who needs what you can give. It's not like that, isn't it?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "You're offering me safety, privacy, protection, all things I desperately need right now, all things only you can provide. If I accept, where does that leave us? Equal partners or you as my benefactor?" David removed his sunglasses and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "I don't care about power dynamics. I care about you being okay." "I care about that too, but I also care about knowing myself, about being certain that what's between us is real and not just me being grateful for rescue." Jessica's throat tightened. "I told you I was afraid of disappearing. Well, right now I'm vanishing into your world. Every article, every photo, every headline, it's about you. I'm just the supporting character in your story." "That's not how I see you." "I know, but that's how the world sees me, and eventually I'll start seeing myself that way too." David reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "What do you need?" he asked. "Tell me what you need and I'll do it." Jessica felt tears building but forced them back. "I need you to let me go, not forever maybe, but right now. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by my relationship to you." "You're asking me to walk away." "I'm asking you to give me space to be whole on my own, so that if we do this, if we really try, it's because we choose each other, not because I needed saving and you were there." David's jaw clenched, pain flashing across his features. "And if I can't, if I don't want to lose you?" "Then you never really saw me," Jessica said softly. "You saw someone to protect, someone to save. But I don't want to be your project, David. I want to be your equal." He was quiet for a long moment, thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "How long?" he finally asked. "I don't know. Until the media moves on. Until I can walk down the street without being recognized. Until I remember what it feels like to just be me. And then maybe we try again, on different terms, with clearer boundaries." David pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers. She could feel him trembling. "This is killing me," he whispered. "Me too." They sat like that as the sun set, holding each other like they could stop the inevitable through sheer force of will. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears on their cheeks. "I won't call," David said. "Won't text, won't send cars or flowers or any of it. You have my number. When you're ready, if you're ready, it's your choice." Jessica nodded, not trusting her voice. She stood and walked away before she could change her mind. She didn't look back, even though every instinct screamed to turn around, to run back, to choose the easier path of letting him fix everything. But easy had never been her dream. Real had. And right now, real meant learning to stand alone, even when standing together felt like the only thing that made sense. David watched her disappear into the evening crowd, hands clenched at his sides. For the first time in his adult life, money and power couldn't solve his problem. All he could do was wait, and hope that when Jessica Martin finally looked in the mirror and saw herself clearly, she'd still see room for him beside her. 3 weeks later, Jessica sat in her newly reinstated hospital locker room, staring at her scrubs like they belonged to someone else. The media storm had passed, as these things eventually did. A celebrity scandal had stolen the headlines. The photographers had moved on to easier prey. Her Instagram remained deleted, but the constant buzzing of her phone had finally stopped. She was back at work, back in class, back to her regular life. Except nothing felt regular anymore. "You're doing it again," Sarah said, sitting beside her on the bench. "That thing where you're physically here but mentally somewhere else." Jessica blinked. "Sorry, just tired." "You've been just tired for 3 weeks. Sarah studied her with the blunt concern only a best friend could manage. "Have you heard from him at all?" "No, that was the agreement." "Screw the agreement. Do you want to hear from him?" Jessica's chest tightened. She'd asked herself that question 1,000 times, usually at 2 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and the silence felt suffocating. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted quietly. "Bullshit." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "You know exactly what you want. You're just terrified of admitting it because then you'd have to decide if it's worth the risk." Before Jessica could respond, her supervisor appeared in the doorway. "Martin, you're on cardiac floor tonight. Room 512 needs vitals." Jessica grabbed her stethoscope and stood, grateful for the escape. Sarah called after her. Running from the question doesn't make it go away. The shift dragged with the particular exhaustion that came from emotional numbness rather than physical work. Jessica moved through her tasks mechanically, checking monitors, administering medication, charting symptoms. Her hands knew what to do even when her mind wandered. During her break, she found herself in the hospital chapel, a quiet space she discovered during her first week. Empty pews, dim lighting, and a stillness that felt like permission to feel without judgment. She sat in the back row and let herself think about David for the first time in days. The way he'd looked at her in the park, pain etched across features that usually projected only control. The way his hand had trembled when he'd held hers. The way he'd let her walk away instead of fighting, because fighting would have proven her point about him trying to manage her choices. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Chen from the cafe you brought David to. He left something here weeks ago, said to contact you if it ever surfaced. Can you stop by?" Jessica's heart stuttered. She texted back, "I'll come by tomorrow." The next morning, she entered the cafe to find Mrs. Chen wiping down tables, the early crowd not yet arrived. "Jessica, good to see you, sweetheart. You look thin. Are you eating?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen. You said David left something." The older woman's expression softened with understanding. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small notebook, leather-bound, well-worn. "He came back the day after your photo was everywhere. Sat in that corner booth for 4 hours writing. When he left, he forgot this. I called the number on his business card last week. He said I should give it to you." Jessica took the notebook with trembling hands. "Did he say anything else?" "Just that you'd know what to do with it." Mrs. Chen squeezed her shoulder. "That boy looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. Whatever happened between you two, don't let fear make the decision." Jessica nodded mutely and left before the tears could fall. She waited until she was home, door locked, world shut out before opening the notebook. David's handwriting filled the pages, strong, precise strokes that somehow looked lonely on the paper. Day 1 without Jessica. I've run companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But I have no idea how to function in a world where she's not in it. Everything feels muted, colors less vibrant, silence less peaceful and more like absence. I keep reaching for my phone to text her about small things, a terrible coffee shop pun, a song that reminded me of our conversation. Then I remember the agreement. Remember that loving her means respecting her need for space, even when that space feels like it's crushing me. Day 5. Went back to work today. Board meeting about the quantum acquisition. I've been planning this move for 2 years. It should feel like victory. Instead, I sat in that conference room surrounded by people celebrating my success, and all I could think was, who cares? What's the point of building an empire if there's no one to share the view with? Jessica once asked me what I was afraid of. I told her I was scared of being wanted only for what I could provide. But now I realize the deeper fear, that I'd finally find someone who wanted me for who I am, and I'd lose her anyway. Day 12. Saw a nurse at a restaurant tonight. Same scrubs, same exhausted expression Jessica wore after double shifts. I almost approached her, desperate for any connection to that world, to Jessica's world. Realized how pathetic that was. Realized I've spent my entire adult life building walls to keep people out, and the moment someone scaled them, I had no idea how to let her stay. Day 18. My therapist asked what I learned from this. I told her I learned that love isn't something you can strategize or control. You can't acquire it like a company or manage it like a portfolio. You can only offer yourself honestly and hope the other person chooses to stay. Jessica taught me that. She also taught me that sometimes loving someone means letting them go, even when every instinct screams to hold tighter. If she never comes back, at least I'll know I experienced something real, something that mattered more than every dollar I've ever earned. The entries continued for 21 days, each one raw and honest in ways Jessica knew David would never be in person. The vulnerability he'd shown her in the hospital room, magnified and laid bare. The final entry was dated yesterday. Day 21. I'm done waiting passively. Done pretending I'm okay with this separation. Not because I'm trying to control the situation, but because Jessica deserves to know the truth. I love her. Not the idea of her, not what she represents, her. The woman who works double shifts and dreams of mattering, who protected her virginity because she was waiting for meaning, who walked away from me because she valued herself too much to accept rescue. I love her stubbornness and her strength, her compassion and her fear, the way she sees people, really sees them, beneath the armor they wear. I'm going to ask for one more conversation, not to convince her or change her mind, just to tell her the truth, because she deserves honesty, even if honesty means hearing that I can't imagine my future without her in it. And then if she still chooses to walk away, I'll respect that. I'll let her go. But I won't regret trying. Jessica closed the notebook, tears streaming freely now. 3 weeks, 21 days, and he'd been feeling everything she'd been feeling in perfect, aching parallel. Her phone rang, David's number. She answered before she could overthink it. "You read it," he said, not a question. "Mrs. Chen gave it to me this morning. I didn't plan for you to see that. I left it there by accident, and when Mrs. Chen called, I thought," he exhaled shakily, "I thought you deserved to know where my head was, even if it changes nothing." "David, let me say this, please, before I lose my nerve." Jessica waited, heart hammering. "I spent 3 weeks trying to respect your space, trying to be the person who doesn't use money or power to solve problems. But I can't do this anymore, Jessica. I can't pretend I'm okay with us being apart." "I'm not asking you to pretend. I know you're not asking me for anything. You never did. That's one of the things I love about you." The word hung between them, love. I'm not trying to pressure you, he continued quickly. I'm not expecting you to say it back or make any decisions right now. I just need you to know that what we had wasn't casual for me. It wasn't an experiment or a distraction. It was the most real thing I've experienced in my entire life. Jessica wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It was real for me too. Then can I see you, one more time, not at a park where cameras might find us, not at the hospital, somewhere private where we can just talk honestly. She thought about the past 3 weeks, the emptiness that had followed her despite being surrounded by people, the way nothing tasted quite right, nothing felt quite complete. She'd walked away to find herself, and she'd rediscovered her strength, her independence, her ability to stand alone. But standing alone didn't mean she had to stay alone. Where? She asked quietly. I have a cabin, 2 hours north of the city. No staff, no security, no connection to my public life. Just trees and silence. I'll text you the address. Come this weekend if you want, or don't. The choice is yours. David. I mean it, Jessica. If you decide this is goodbye, I'll accept that. But if there's any part of you that wants to try again, on different terms with better boundaries, I'm asking for the chance to show you I can be the person you need. Jessica closed her eyes, listening to his breathing on the other end of the line. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. They hung up without saying goodbye. Jessica sat with the notebook in her lap, rereading passages that gutted her with their honesty. Sarah was right, she did know what she wanted. The question was whether she was brave enough to reach for it. Friday evening, Jessica threw a weekend bag into her car and typed the address David had sent into her GPS. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, didn't post about it or document it. This was hers, theirs. As the city lights faded behind her and trees closed in on either side of the highway, Jessica felt something shift inside her chest. Fear, yes, but also hope. And the quiet certainty that whatever happened in that cabin, she was choosing it with clear eyes and an open heart. The GPS announced, destination ahead. Jessica pulled up to a small cabin, surrounded by forest, warm light glowing in the windows. David stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, waiting. Not controlling, not managing. Just waiting for her to decide if this was an ending or a beginning. Jessica sat in her car for a full minute before turning off the engine, watching David through the windshield. He hadn't moved from the porch, hadn't rushed toward her or tried to orchestrate the moment. He just stood there, vulnerable and patient, letting her control the pace. She stepped out into the cool evening air, pulling her jacket tighter. Hi, she said, the word feeling absurdly simple for the weight of the moment. Hi, his voice was rough, like he'd been holding his breath. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either, not until I was already on the highway. They stood in the space between her car and the cabin, the distance both physical and metaphorical. Thank you for coming, David said, and for reading the notebook. I know that was honest, Jessica finished. It was honest, maybe the most honest thing anyone's ever shared with me. You deserve to know where I stood, even if it scared you away. It didn't scare me away. She took a tentative step closer. It made me realize I wasn't the only one struggling these past few weeks. Not even close. He gestured toward the cabin. Come inside, I made dinner. Well, I attempted dinner. Fair warning. Cooking skills are limited to pasta and apologies. Despite everything, Jessica smiled. Pasta sounds perfect. The cabin was exactly as he described. Simple, warm, removed from the world that had tried to define them. A stone fireplace crackled with fresh logs. Soft music played from a speaker. The table was set with mismatched plates and candles that looked like he'd bought them at a roadside store. Nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress. Just effort, just care. This is nice, Jessica said, meaning it. David pulled out her chair, and they sat across from each other like they had at Mrs. Chen's cafe, though the air felt heavier now with everything unsaid. They ate in comfortable silence at first, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. But eventually, David set down his fork and looked at her directly. I need to say something before we go any further. Jessica's heart quickened, but she nodded. These 3 weeks apart, they were hell, but they were also necessary. You were right about everything. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I was trying to solve your problems with money and power because that's the only language I've known for so long. I was trying to protect you, but really I was trying to control the situation, control the outcome. David, let me finish, please. He took a shaky breath. You asked me to let you go so you could be whole on your own, and watching you walk away was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it taught me something crucial. Love isn't about possession or rescue. It's about witnessing someone's wholeness and choosing to stand beside it, not in front of it. Tears pricked Jessica's eyes. You've been thinking about this a lot. I've thought about nothing else. His hand reached across the table, palm up, offering. I can't promise the media will never be a problem again. I can't promise my world won't complicate yours, but I can promise to never make you shrink to fit my life. If we do this, we build something new together. Equal partners, your voice as loud as mine. Jessica placed her hand in his, feeling the familiar warmth, the rightness of the connection. I've been thinking too, she said quietly, about why I walked away, and it wasn't just about the media or the pressure. It was about fear. Fear of what? Fear that I'd lose myself, that I'd become an accessory to your life instead of the author of my own. She looked down at their joined hands. But somewhere in the past 3 weeks, I realized something. Being with someone doesn't mean disappearing, not if it's the right person, not if they see you as clearly as you see yourself. And do I, David asked, see you clearly? You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You asked about my dreams when people only asked about my availability for shifts. You treated my virginity like a sacred choice instead of an inconvenience. Her voice cracked. You loved me for exactly who I am, not who I might become if I fit your world better. I still do, love you, I mean. I know, Jessica squeezed his hand. I read 21 Days of Proof. They cleared the dishes together, moving around the small kitchen with surprising coordination. When the last plate was dried and put away, David turned to her with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror. What happens now? He asked. Jessica's pulse thundered in her ears. She knew what she wanted, had known since she'd made the decision to drive here, but saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if she'd fly or fall. I want to stay tonight, she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. Not just to talk, to be with you, completely. David went very still. Jessica, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, that's why I want to. She moved closer, closing the distance between them. I told you I was waiting for something that felt like forever, for someone who saw meaning in the choice, not just the outcome. I do see the meaning, I see you. His hands came up to cup her face, gentle and reverent. But I need you to be absolutely certain, because once we cross this line, there's no going back for me. You'll be written into every part of my life. I'm certain, Jessica whispered. I've never been more certain of anything. He kissed her then, soft at first, questioning, giving her space to change her mind. But when she kissed him back, when her hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer, the gentleness gave way to something deeper. Hunger mixed with tenderness, need tempered by respect. They moved to the bedroom without breaking apart, a tangle of limbs and whispered confirmations. David pulled back every few moments to check her eyes, to make sure she was still present, still choosing this. Talk to me, he murmured against her neck. Tell me what you need. I need you to go slow, Jessica admitted. And I need you to know this isn't about proving anything. It's about trust. I know, He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "We go at your pace, always." They undressed each other carefully. No rushing, no performance. Just two people learning the landscape of skin and breath and vulnerability. When David looked at her, really looked, taking in every inch of her with wonder instead of hunger, Jessica felt more seen than she had in her entire life. "You're beautiful," he said, and the way he said it made her believe him. "So are you." They came together slowly, with whispered instructions and gentle adjustments. There was pain, brief and sharp, but David's hands on her face, his voice in her ear telling her she was perfect, she was safe, she was loved. It transformed the discomfort into something bearable, then into something more. Jessica had imagined this moment countless times, built it up in her mind as something either magical or terrifying. The reality was simpler and more profound than either extreme. It was intimate. It was honest. It was two people choosing each other with full awareness of what that choice meant. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like pine and wood smoke, hearts still racing, breath slowly returning to normal. David traced patterns on her shoulder, his expression somewhere between awe and devastation. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Jessica turned to face him fully, reading the vulnerability in his eyes. He was terrified he'd done something wrong, terrified he'd taken something he hadn't earned. She pressed her forehead against his, breathing him in. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "That was exactly what I needed it to be." Relief flooded his features, but tears followed. David Hill, billionaire, tech mogul, man who faced down corporate sharks without flinching, cried silently as he held her. "Why are you crying?" Jessica asked gently, wiping away tears with her thumb. He struggled for words, throat working. "Because you trusted me with something sacred. Because you chose me when you could have chosen safety. Because..." His voice broke completely. "Because you're my only dream, Jessica. Everything I built, everything I achieved, none of it mattered until you." Jessica felt her own tears fall as she cupped his face. "You were my only dream too," she whispered. "The person I was waiting for, the reason I refused to settle." David pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. They stayed like that as the fire in the other room died to embers, as the night deepened around them, as the world outside the cabin continued spinning without their permission or participation. "What happens now?" Jessica asked eventually. "When we leave this cabin and go back to reality?" David was quiet for a moment, considering seriously. "I don't know," he admitted. "The media might come back. People will have opinions. Your life will be complicated in ways it wasn't before." "That's not exactly reassuring." "I know, but I also know this: I'm not going anywhere. Whatever challenges come, we face them together. Not me solving things for you, but us figuring it out side by side." Jessica propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light filtering from the main room. "I'll need boundaries," she said. "My career, my education, those are mine. I won't give them up or compromise them. I wouldn't ask you to. And I need you to understand that I'm not interested in your money or your status. I need you to believe that." "I do believe it. You proved it by walking away when accepting my help would have been easier. And sometimes I'll need space. Time with friends, time alone. That's not me pulling away, it's me staying whole." "I understand." He kissed her temple. "Anything else?" "Yeah, one more thing." Jessica met his eyes seriously. "I need you to promise that if this gets too hard, if we start losing ourselves in the chaos, we'll talk about it, honestly, before resentment or fear makes the decision for us." David's expression softened with something that looked like relief. "I promise, both ways. If I start slipping into old patterns, trying to control or fix instead of listening, you call me on it." "Deal." They sealed the promise with a kiss that was softer than before, less urgent but somehow more binding. Morning came gradually. sunlight filtering through trees and warming the room in shades of gold. Jessica woke to find David already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "How long have you been staring at me?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. "Not long, maybe 20 minutes. "Creep," she said affectionately. "Probably, but you're beautiful when you sleep, less guarded." Jessica stretched, feeling the pleasant ache of new intimacy, the slight soreness that reminded her of the choice she'd made. "No regrets?" David asked quietly. She considered the question honestly. "Not about last night, maybe about not bringing coffee. I'm useless before caffeine." He laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I can fix that, there's a pot brewing." They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, coffee on the porch, breakfast made together, dishes washed while arguing about music. It felt startlingly normal for two people whose relationship had been anything but. "I should probably head back this afternoon," Jessica said eventually. "I have a shift tomorrow, and I need to do laundry and pretend to study." "Okay," David didn't argue or try to extend the weekend. "Can I see you again, this week?" "Wednesday, I'm off at 7. "Wednesday, I'll pick you up from the hospital." Jessica raised an eyebrow, not afraid of being seen together. "Terrified," he admitted, "but more afraid of hiding you like you're something shameful. You're not, we're not." She kissed him for that, for choosing courage over comfort. When Jessica finally drove away from the cabin, David standing on the porch waving until she disappeared around the bend, she felt different. Not diminished by loving him, not lost in his shadow. Expanded, amplified, more herself than she'd been before. Her phone buzzed with a text as she merged onto the highway. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us. I'll spend every day trying to deserve it. D." She smiled and typed back, "You already do. See you Wednesday." The city appeared on the horizon, all glass and steel and chaos. Her real life waited there, shifts and classes and bills and ordinary struggles. But now there was also David, not as a solution to her problems or an escape from reality. As a partner, an equal, someone who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her because of it, not despite it. The road stretched ahead, uncertain and complicated. But for the first time in her life, Jessica Martin wasn't afraid of the unknown. She'd learned the most important lesson: being seen didn't mean being saved. And love, real love, didn't ask her to be smaller. It dared her to be more. 3 months later. The coffee shop was packed with the usual morning crowd when Jessica walked in, white coat over her scrubs, stethoscope visible. Mrs. Chen waved from behind the counter, the usual. "Please, and whatever he's having." David sat at their booth, the same one where they'd first talked about dreams and invisibility. He looked up from his laptop and smiled, the kind of smile that still made her heart skip. She slid in across from him, and he immediately closed the computer. "How was the night shift?" "Long. We had 3 cardiac arrests and a pediatric emergency. I'm dead on my feet." "Want to skip dinner tonight? We can reschedule." "Absolutely not. Your mom is flying in specifically to meet me. I'm not missing that." David grimaced. "You can still back out, she's a lot." "I can handle a lot." Jessica squeezed his hand. "Besides, it's just dinner. What's the worst that could happen?" "She could show you baby pictures of me in a dinosaur costume." "I'm counting on it." Their coffee arrived, and they sat together like they had so many times before, talking about everything and nothing, stealing bites of each other's pastries, existing in a bubble that felt separate from the chaos outside. A few people glanced their way. Some recognized them, but the initial frenzy had faded, replaced by occasional curiosity instead of constant surveillance. Jessica had learned to live with it. The attention wasn't comfortable, but it was manageable. And David had learned to let her manage it herself. "I have something for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his bag. Jessica opened it to find a check, made out to her nursing school for the exact amount of her remaining tuition. She looked up sharply. David, before you protest, let me explain. This isn't me trying to solve your problems. This is me investing in someone brilliant who's going to save lives. Consider it a scholarship from the Hill Foundation. You'll sign paperwork, same as any other recipient. It's official and has nothing to do with us personally. Jessica stared at the check, emotions warring. I don't need. I know you don't need it, but you deserve it. And watching you work yourself to exhaustion juggling 2 jobs and school when I have resources sitting unused feels wrong. He leaned forward. This doesn't change anything between us. You're still paying for your own coffee, and I'm still splitting rent on our apartment when we move in together. When we move in together, I don't remember agreeing to that. Fine, if we move in together, hypothetically. Jessica studied the check, then David's face, open, hopeful, trying so hard to give without taking. Okay, she said finally, but I want the paperwork, official scholarship terms, and I'm paying you back someday. Deal, though the payback will be in the form of you saving lives and making the world better, not cash. She rolled her eyes but smiled. They finished their coffee as the morning sun streamed through the windows, lighting everything in shades of gold. Outside, the city hummed with a million stories, people rushing to work, chasing dreams, building lives. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a nursing student and a billionaire sat in a corner booth, choosing each other over and over again. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but honestly, wholly, with eyes wide open. Jessica Martin had stopped being invisible. Not because someone put her in the spotlight, but because she'd finally learned to see herself. And David Hill had stopped being alone. Not because someone needed what he could provide, but because someone wanted who he was underneath it all. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, it was something better. It was real. And real, messy, complicated, beautiful. That was exactly what they'd both been dreaming of all along. If you loved Jessica and David's story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next emotional journey. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more captivating love stories. Comment below, what was your favorite moment? Should we continue their story? Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.